Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have Debra Strougo, who is the CEO of Fitizens Holdings, which does consulting and advising of health and wellness brands. Debra, how are you?
I'm great, Frank. I'm so pleased to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure, Debra. So I want to kick things off. I consider you a franchise expert, and I know fitness and health and wellness is your thing, but I'd love to start things off by telling me, how did franchising find you?
Oh, well, that's a wonderful question, Frank. I knew really nothing about franchising. In fact, I was just saying the other day how I used to pull up into like a strip mall, or I live in Newport Beach now in California, and pull it up into a shopping center and have no idea which was like a franchise and which wasn't. I didn't even know that was the thing. And Now it's just crazy. I can rattle them all off. This one, that one. I know who owns them, who's invested, when they started, if they're even successful or not, who their competitive set is. It's just hysterical. So I would say, to answer your question, about less than 10 years ago, 8 years ago or so, I did not know any of those answers to those questions. Maybe 10 years ago. It's 2024. Probably around 2015 or so, I was looking for an expansion plan for Row House, which was a brand that I had founded and created in New York City, kind of in the big boom of boutique fitness. Where a lot of other brands were emerging from this idea of like really niche, strong communities against fitness modalities and a very high touch experience. And so that was coming into like a 2,500 to 4,000 square foot type of a box in New York. And we were kind of like where a good amount of those businesses were emerging from. And I had created Row House. It was self-funded. I had done it with Eric Van Furlik, my husband. And we needed an investment partner at some point and looked at different ways to expand. And one of them that I researched heavily at the time, obviously, was franchising. Initially, I thought to myself, well, I could go out and figure out how to franchise. And I found at the time the iFranchise Group in Chicago and went and visited them, I think in probably 2016, spent some time with them, saw the Chicago franchises, kind of opened my eyes to the world of what franchising is and who are the players, and started to really understand that it was a quick way to scale a brand. Obviously, it was less capital intensive. And if you found the right franchisees, you would figure out exactly like how to infiltrate a market, theoretically, like where the right real estate is in that neighborhood, who the right people would be to drum up business, community and evangelism and all of that in that actual community, and have people that believed in your mission and vision and be able to do that over and over and over. So I loved it, as a business model. The question just kind of became, would that be the right one for Row House, number one? Because obviously there's other ways to expand corporate. We were looking at a tech play. We had other deals kind of lined out. So would that be the right one? And then how exactly to achieve shifting into a franchise, into a franchisor, because it is a different focus, play, set of tons of things that you have to create, right? So I guess you could say that that's kind of how it found me.
Mm-hmm. Right. I find that most of us get kind of back into the whole franchising thing, right? There's very few people I've known who have a family lineage of franchising. And most of us kind of back into it where we start evaluating the different options of growing my business. So with that said, Debra, here's what I'd like to do. Since a lot of the audience are folks who are either looking to franchise their business or they are early emerging franchisors, including people looking to buy franchises, I'd like to kind of get back into your head of when you were first thinking, you have Row House and you're thinking of franchising. So kind of what were you and your husband thinking, like the pros and cons of, should we do this or shouldn't we do this? So kind of take me back to what life was like and what you were contemplating.
Yeah, I think we were contemplating a successful growth strategy. At the end of the day, that's what we're contemplating. Like,
Sure.
what would a successful growth strategy be? So you have a couple of locations and you want to add another one. If you're gonna put all of your money up to do it, right? Or bring in investors to do it and do that entire build out by yourself, what is the likelihood that that particular location is going to succeed? Did you make the right real estate choice? Did you hit the right budget on your build out? All of those types of things. And then how much duration of time is it going to take to do that yet again and again and again to grow your brands, right? So that we were thinking about that because we wanted to be the market leader
Mm-hmm.
also in rowing. And so we wanted to be quick to market, that being balanced out with the notion of we had created out of the gate a very strict documentation process. So it was my vision or goal, and probably because I am a brand developer by nature and by prior kind of skill and schooling, you could say, from other things I've done in my career. But I wanted there to be a consistent experience in all of the locations. And because I wanted consistency, I was very focused on the foundational brand, who it was, why we're here, who we're looking to serve, and how we show up each and every time. So I wanted a consistent client experience, a consistent look and feel. I wanted a consistent, relatively consistent staff base, and everybody to, obviously it's cliche, but we
Mm-hmm.
say, to be rowing in the right direction on that. So because of that, I had kind of created a very replicable system, I believe, and could scale relatively quickly as long as capital wasn't kind of the question, capital and waiting and finding and whatever. So those were the things that I was really thinking about in franchising.
Sure. So speed to market, using other people's money. Those are one of the most popular reasons, right, of franchising your concept. And one of the advantages you had is you did have systems and processes in place. That sounds like you were really ready to replicate this. How many corporate locations did you have at the time that you were ready to franchise?
We had 5.
You had 5. Were these all in New York?
Yes.
And so, Arsha, take me through where does the story of Row House go from there?
Yes. So we considered doing all of the franchising, the setting up the FDD and all of that type of stuff on our own or with support from a group, and ultimately determined we're not franchise experts. At the time, I knew very little about what an FDD was,
Sure.
what has to be in it. Certainly very little about the franchise sales process. Friend Dev knew very, very little about franchisee handholding and the personalities that you're looking for as you embark upon this, how the team had to look when you became a franchisor, yet still had some corporate stores, all of that. One thing I will say that I did know is I did know kinds of I did know that my brands would be relevant elsewhere because, and this goes back, I think I shared that I worked in New York City tourism for a while under Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And there, it's very similar in a way to a franchise kind of value proposition or call to action. You're attracting almost to the national marketing funds of any franchisor, right? Like you're attracting to the main promise of whatever this brand or business is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a franchise, a food franchise, a beauty franchise, a fitness franchise, you're attracting to that brand. And, in that case, I use New York City as a brand. But
Sure.
within it, you have user groups, you have user targets, you have some differentiators. In the New York City example, it's an attraction versus a hotel, whatever. I think in franchising, it's New York City versus California versus, Omaha, Nebraska, right? And so you're basically like settling out kind of this Uber brands initiative and then the different kinds of people that you're feeding in to be your constituents that are going to ultimately pay you. When I think of the New York City tourism example, it's economic stimulus to the city
Mm-hmm.
and dollars spent. For us in franchising, it's tickets or butts and seats. In the example of fitness and restaurants, it's actual meals. So really kind of thinking about that all, I think, is how I looked at what we would be doing from an Uber franchise standpoint and recognizing that like, across the country. We have people that this brands will serve, but there will need to be things that are different across it. There will need to be things that are completely the same. And so I think that the people that are emerging, really well at the earlier days in franchising, they're coming in with like an understanding of that, or they're bringing people in who can help them understand that. I just helped somebody in Canada really on this, and she's going to soar. I mean, she's totally going to soar because it's like unique, but it's not so unique that she can't find tons of people in this need solved kind of pain point, so that her location or her franchise, when it shows up in their market, it will speak to them despite the little, differences within the market that need to be kind of absorbed into the franchise system.
Sure. Well, let's go there when it comes to like having clients that already have a strong base of company-owned locations. So in your case with Row House, you had 5 locations, which I think, of course, that helped you because you had to have systems and processes built in to be able to sustain and to be able to grow, right? So you're already I think there was a great assumption there that you were going to do well when you franchised. But what is a challenge though for a franchisor that's starting out when they have already say 5 locations when it comes to support? Because when you already have like 5 company-owned locations, you've made a pretty big commitment to the corporate-owned model, and now going into franchising, you're shifting gears and you're now responsible for franchisee success, which, as we all know, is a little bit different than being able to manage people that companies that you own.
Oh, 100%. Yes. So Frank, I knew nothing about franchising, embarking upon that. So the choice we made was to partner with Exponential kind of as like, you could call it our first investor really, because it was the first time that we took in outside money. They called it an acquisition. They took the brand's expansion rights for Row House to go ahead and to expand Row House through franchising. So I really only learned franchising in the back seat there. I certainly stayed involved for a duration of time to train up the corporate staff that came in as the franchise operations. I kept my units and I flipped them to franchises. So I got to, kind of play within the new franchise structure. So personally, I saw all of it emerge through the vantage points, but through the expertise of Exponential, who had already built a very successful franchise system in Club Pilates and had brought Cycle Bar in as well at that point. And so we were kind of brands number 3, Exponential's at 11 or 10 brands right now. And then I kind of also had a front seat in, all these other brands that were starting to emerge in franchising, but learns kind of from the best. This is how you would franchise, this concept. This is how you're franchising the other concepts. And then put my own kind of like understanding and stamp to the degree that I was involved kind of coming out of the gate on, these are the people that we're looking. This is why this is going to be different than how it's done at Club Pilates. Well, also financially, structurally, there's things to watch out for when you do something like that. Because, for example, we had 25 people in any given room at a time, whereas Club Pilates had 12, right? So I think that there's a huge benefit for people that are coming out of the gate that look at kind of like some of these tack on strategic partnerships to get to know and understand franchising, because there's truly so much that goes into it. Yet at the same time, I would say like now that I really have come to know it and understand it, it's an amazing way to help somebody else look to grow and expand. You just have to find the right people in your room to get you there. Because if you just go into it without something that's readily replicable or without a true understanding of what you are and what needs to shift and all of those types of things, to your point, it's a huge thing to embark on your own.
Yeah. Well, look, you decided after the 5 locations, right, to partner up, have a strategic partner with Exponential. So you had this front row seat, as I think you said, where you saw all these other brands grow. So I'm curious, what were some of your big observations having this front row seat and seeing a umbrella of brands? What were some of the key takeaways as you saw some of these other companies come on and grow within the company?
That's a great question. Well, I think not everything is a rinse and repeat. It's not really a find and replace model. The notion of like taking another company's operations manual and just flopping out your name and slotting it in. The notion of taking somebody else's sales process and just making that your own. it doesn't necessarily resonate. It doesn't necessarily work. Even the labor model, you could see that within some of the expo brands. It's different. One is more high intensity labor. And so there's a smaller, profit margin. So it's higher revenue, like where does that all sort out based on your product, based on your service? So I think that generally I've seen a lot of that, right? Because the minute that you have a different business model at the end of the day, you have to also incentivize people differently,
Right.
right? And so from compensation structure, things like that. So I think, at the end of the day, you almost need to be so smart and understanding on your brand or your business that you remember that you need to drive your own business financials, just yet take the learnings and the expertise of how to do the actual franchise scale and franchise support and what makes most sense. Does it make most sense to do a weekly call with your whole entire team, or to break it up into the different constituents within a different store or unit?
Mm-hmm.
What's the right training? What's the right support? What's going to move the needle for the business? That's another thing that I've really learned. It has to come from within. It has to come from within your P&L, within your structure, considering, of course, best practices that are working elsewhere and different ideas that are working elsewhere. But ultimately, the needle is only going to get moved on your business if it all makes sense within your business's framework.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you have a strategic partner, this is definitely not a one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter model that just because there was other fitness holdings as part of this umbrella, everybody's business has different support needs. And even though the targeted audience may be similar or not, you really have to take a very customized individual approach, right? When you're part of a portfolio of brands.
Yeah. And I mean, but at the same time, the leverage is massive,
Yes.
right? The leverage. And so that's hugely beneficial. And, a reason why I went down that path that I would never, ever, sneeze at, like the leverage of showing up in a big way at a franchise show with all the different, franchise brokers around you, the leverage of the back end tools, the leverage of the back end's buying power, on retail and products and all of that type of stuff. That's huge. And also that's a huge reason that you take it down a notch, right? We're talking about franchisors, right? Coming into like a franchise strategic partner and a holdings company, take it down a level to the franchisees going into a franchisor.
Right.
There are many entrepreneurs too, right? It took me a long time to realize that I wasn't the entrepreneur in the room. The franchisees are the entrepreneurs too. And, they could go out and do this on their own, but they buy into a system because there's back-end processes that make a ton of sense for them. Yet they still are going to have a little creativity on the floor with regards to like, where do I show up in market? Who do I hire? Like those types of things. So I think it's an interesting kind of food chain of who you are and what you're going to lean on and bring, yet what you're going to kind of focus on to ultimately have a successful business, which is just the eye on the prize that we have to make sure we're headed towards.
Right. So I think that was great that you had an eye on the prize. You knew exactly where you wanted to go, but I want to bring up a different angle here that I know many emerging founders struggle with, and that is giving up their baby is sometimes how they feel, right? So Row House was your baby. How did you feel? I know initially it's probably very, very exciting that somebody has interest in helping you grow the business and grow the baby, and they have the expertise. But there's also some fear there too, and so there has to be some reluctance. And I know many emerging founders do have that reluctance that their identity is so tied to their business. How did you untie that?
Yeah, honestly, it was hard. I remember right after kind of it all went down and I took a step back, which I was very happy about because I had a young family at the time and I just felt like I wasn't driving the business forward the way that the business almost deserved to be driven forward. And so that was part of it. I wanted somebody to come in that didn't mind working on a Sunday afternoon, to be honest. And I was having a hard time with that after doing it for so many years. So anyway, I kind of got to a place where I felt like, whoa, my identity is all wrapped up in Row House. What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And I remember walking into an Equinox and being like, okay, I'm going to work out here. Wow, this whole world still exists. Who knew? Because I've worked for Equinox so many years back too. And so I think it's hard. It's hard to make that shift. But personally, for me, this was meant to be kind of like a brand building opportunity, serve a market that I didn't think was served, and move on to another chapter. I had a 5-year stint in kind of digital publishing aggregation and brand building in the licensing space under Needs of Use Scripts and Scripts Ventures company in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
That was meaningful. That was like a meaningful chapter of my life. And then I had the 5-year stint or so with New York City Tourism under Mayor Michael Bloomberg, which is a meaningful stint. I had the side hustle along. This was my first foray into fitness. And I was like, it's not going to be my only thing. Like I love the brands. I had major integrity towards the owners that bought in, and I wanted to continue to serve them. And so that became a little challenging for me because I wanted to continue to serve them and didn't necessarily always, have the influence that I would have loved giving up my baby, but I had to trust the process and I had to kind of step away because that's the deal I signed up for. So I think, the other side of it is like, when you make any sort of decision with your baby, you're saying you really have to do your due diligence. You have to think about the decision you're making. And ultimately, you make the best decision you can make at the time you make it. Ironically, I was just with Anthony from Exponential. I consider him a wonderful business leader, and seeing what he's done over the course of the years has been extremely impressive. And we had this conversation. He actually said that to me. He said, you make the best decision you can at the time that you make it. And I think that that's what I did. And Eric and I were aligned on this being a good move. It actually brought us out to California a bit, which has been wonderful for our family. And it's helped me get to a place where I love what I do now, which is in many times helping other franchisors that are along their way, figure out the right way to grow, specifically on like client value proposition, some support, understanding the franchisor relationship in the early days as you emerge, so you don't sign up for the wrong deals, that type of stuff. And so I've done this a couple of times over with a few brands, and I love it. So keep the eye on the prize, we said, from like the business standpoint, but also from the personal standpoint. I think letting go of my baby was just a way to get myself to the next level where I could serve other businesses as well.
Sure. Maybe it was a little bit easier for you since you had already achieved fulfillment in a few other stints throughout your career, right? You had the 5-year and then the 5-year with New York City Tourism. So you were having these blocks of fulfillment and you had practiced moving on to something else that you were enjoy doing. And I think maybe
I'm writing that down. That's really nice.
Well, I think it's true. Just hearing your story, it makes perfect sense, because there are a lot of founders though, Debra, that this is like their one and only thing, but you had already kind of built that muscle of being able to do something, feel like, okay, I took this as far as I want to go. And then you call it luck, fate, whatever you want to call it, but you were getting fulfillment in the next thing. So
yeah. And from that standpoint, I think you're right. Like if it was my only thing and it was my whole life wrapped up in it, I don't think giving up your baby is necessarily the right move. The thing there also is, it's true, nobody will ever understand how to dial up or turn up the business as much as the founder. It doesn't happen. Like I had brought on a COO at one point and she was wonderful and she had major skills in certain areas beyond what I had. In those particular areas, finance, for example, but ultimately it became important for me to go learn finance in a better way and adopt it in, or, just to find the right people to lean on. But still, I think, if you're here, if this is your business and if you believe you can keep moving to drive it forward, yet you can find the right people to pull in kinds of under your guidance and keep a seat at the table, that's definitely an angle too. And honestly, an angle where I've supported some people, because nobody will ever take care of your business the way you will take care of your business as a founder, I don't think.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So I think it's a great segue now to talk about Fitizens Holdings. So you've been the CEO and that's your baby. Tell me about Fitizens Holdings, on how long ago you started it and what exactly it does.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm laughing because I have a couple of babies.
You do?
Yeah. So as I moved on kind of from day-to-day operations of Row House and took a back seat there, I kept my eye on just helping the health and wellness industry, fitness being obviously a huge part of it, continue to innovate and emerge. We in fitness, there are obviously some great brands that are emerging. I tend to think sometimes about as fitness as hospitality, right? It's really only about butts and seats at the end of the day. So I've gotten involved a little bit, on the wellness side, and even a little bit tangentially on the beauty side as well, or service side. But ultimately I've gotten involved in projects that are helping population health get better, right? So making people feel better about themselves, whether it's kinds of like the IV drip type thing of the world, or these testosterone clinics, or something, like helping people better understand how they can look, feel, and, act better and more confident every day. And so I had come across Pvolve, great brand out of New York, and they had started to scale. Jennifer Aniston had approached Pvolve and said that, as she had become a client, watching the virtual programming during COVID, and was very interested in getting behind it because it really helped her as a woman not break her body down, feeling stronger, and more free as she aged. And it was kind of one of the first things that really kind of like wrapped itself as a brand around her and like lifted her up. So I was pulled in kind of by the president and founder and the investor team to help make sure that they were set up for success for the launch of Pvolve. I did that with a few of my business partners. We operate under Levitate Group. And, one is wonderful in tech, one is wonderful in products and fulfillment, and, overall P&L and profitability. And I kind of came in from marketing, brands, franchise standpoint to help them. And that's one project that I love in the franchise space. We've made a big, huge impact there, helping to secure more franchisees and helping to get that client value proposition down, both from a broad brands level, but also what'll drive the actual locations of a studio. I helped a girl in Canada flip from a licensing model to a franchise model. Very, very interesting, right? When you embark upon licensing, because it's nice and light, and then realize after a little bit that you're not going to be able to really tune it in, turn it up,
Right.
As much as you would like to. So we're in the process of kind of creating all of that to flip. And recently was just announced as a part of Infinity Beyond Fitness, which is a concept coming out of Miami, set to do 10 franchises this year, 250 about in 5 years, and really focused on the holistic wellness journey. So within my Fitizens Holdings, I'm doing things like that. I'm also working with a professional athlete to do something in the youth fitness market. I know, Frank, you have a huge history in the youth fitness, so hopefully we could talk about that in a little bit. But ultimately, I stay involved in a couple of different things because it just lights me up. It's exciting and super fun. I sometimes speak at franchise, conventions. I speak on brands building. And I'm sad I missed you at IFA, Frank. I'm really sad.
We had a great time at the IFA. It was an awesome, awesome time we had at the conference. Just meeting so many people, seeing old friends. It's such a small community of 4,000 franchisors converging.
Yes. And then one thing we're working on right now is kind of in stealth mode. It's a monetization tool for e-commerce across franchisors. And so any franchisor that really has a strong community, I think it works particularly well in the fitness wellness space, and wants to look at kind of a automated, easy to use e-commerce technology that they could just kind of tack on, yet kind of grab economics all along that whole ecosystem, from franchisor to franchise locations, onto the staff and experts within their facility. That's something that I'm working on too, because ultimately, listen, as emerging franchisors, you've hit something. You've grow community, you build business, you've developed kind of this golden thing. And ultimately also just generating the right revenue off of it is key. Like,
Right.
too many people I feel like are like, well, they price this way, they price that way, this is, whatever. And it's like, you really need to know kind of like who you are and how you can generate the right economics off of it to be long-term successful. So this particular, stealth mode tool that I'm working on, I think for the right people can totally play that up. And I look forward to doing that too. So that's a project under Fitizens Holdings as well. I like to stay busy. Can you tell?
Gee, do you think? Yeah. Debra, this all started by you got bit so badly by the franchise bug.
I did?
All because
Did
of
I?
this little row house thing that you thought of and that you decided, I think I'm going to get the strategic partner to help grow this franchise. And then boom, all this happens with Fitizens Holdings. This is phenomenal. I want to know like what took you right from there. So when you turn row house basically over to Exponential to help you grow the business, how did you make the leap to saying, I'm going to start doing some consulting and I'm going to create Fitizens Holdings. I'm going to start helping other franchisors. What inspired you to make that leap?
Honestly, it was also in the face of adversity. Let's start there.
Of course. That's where it always starts. Let's start there.
Yeah. I mean, it was because of COVID and the pandemic, and we all got shut down. And so I needed a new plan. I always knew that because of the exponential deal in row house, I would move on to do something else. But this was kind of a little bit more of a jerky, where did that come from? And it was because my market was shut down in New York City and I kind of had relocated. And truthfully, it's because I rose to be an advocate for the industry at that time and ended up on the board. It was called URSA. Now it has been retitled just recently, the National Health and Fitness Association. I ended up on that board to really kind of help rebrand the industry, to be honest, because we were being looked at as non-essential. I'm not necessarily fighting for essential, just we weren't being looked at as, bringing the physical, mental health and all of those benefits. And so we weren't protected during COVID. And so I wanted to kind of help shift that paradigm so people didn't think of the fitness industry as just meatheads anymore. So when I got involved with that, I kind of just naturally entrepreneur, go-getter, ended up just seeing opportunities for myself within that network. Big box gyms are great. There are some big box franchises out there, but they're not necessarily also the people that create community from the ground up. And I had recognized that I kind of became very good at that. So started to even work with some of the big box guys to help them sort out how to bring more community elements into their gyms so that they weren't losing to this boutique fitness trends, which was starting to show up in their markets everywhere. And that's just kind of how it all got started. I took some time and answered some calls and found places where I could plug in and add value to others. And, that's ultimately, I think, where and needed to make money, to be completely honest, obviously. So in the face of adversity, I kind of found my next chapter in myself and have decided I will not go in on one company. I exist to serve others and have found ways that my past kind of chapters in my career kind of sort into what I'm doing now. So I am not the person that is, fractional CMO to 5 companies doing the exact same thing. I was saying recently, like, I can't keep my head straight that way. But when I'm working with different companies doing different things, I lit up, I could keep it all straight, and it's great. And in a lot of ways, they end up, serving each other. So I do love franchising. I love the franchisees that I've come across along the way and feel a passion to, helping other people be successful and find their path. And I feel like franchising really, really does that. So there's something nice about it for me.
That's awesome. The health and wellness is one of the hottest sectors in franchising. It's not going away. There's a new fitness brand always coming on to the scene. I've interviewed, I think, a pretty high amount, percentage-wise, of all my episodes. I've interviewed quite a bit of founders in the fitness space. And you're the perfect person now to ask this question. That is this: if I was an emerging founder looking to bring my fitness business to the forefront of franchising, how in the world do I get through the clutter and separate myself from the pack? that I get the attention of potential franchisees, not to mention, of course, customers. But I think first and foremost, how in the world am I going to separate myself from the pack when there are so many fitness franchisors that have entered, especially since COVID?
A couple things come to mind. Number one, know your competitive, know the competitive landscape. Know
Absolutely.
what's working, know what's not working, know who's winning, know who's not winning.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go, do kind of secret shop places, get a sense of read job descriptions. I mean, you need to come in with some sort of true understanding of the landscape that you're walking into,
Mm-hmm.
whatever kind of like industry or competitive set you would have. Well, and by the way, you can find experts on that, right? Like there are people, I can basically like in a hot second kind of tell you who the main players are, who's winning, who's not. It may look like a lot of people think that somebody is winning and they're not winning. You know what I mean? Like I get phone calls all the time, like this thing looks like it's blowing up. I actually heard the most recent podcast you did where they said, Soldier Fit, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
put on t-shirts. It was great. It was a great point. Like put on t-shirts so that it looks like you're everywhere. It's the same thing when I was back in ad tech in those days where, when you're trying to raise money or if you have people on your board, you put out of home advertising right in front of their offices. So they feel like you're everywhere and you're doing a
Sure.
great job. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful tactic. And I am not by any means downplaying, the relevance and importance in doing that. But when you're actually growing a brand and growing a business, do not think that brand that is in front of your face that's spending a ton of money, that's doing the Super Bowl ads or whatever, is necessarily the most profitable business on the back end. You cannot think that. So you need to, I think when I started to say be open-minded, like you need to really kind of like not run your own agenda from that
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. You need to take it all in and really come to a place where you like actually, understands who's doing what, because ultimately it's not to get distracted by them. It's to create your own defensibility over here,
Sure.
right? What is the business? How is it going to be the most defensible? If this pricing strategy isn't working over there, if they can't get labor over there at this rate, what are the key kind of drivers of the overall business? If nobody's hitting higher AUVs than X, Y, and Z dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then as I continue to create this, is there a way for me to kind of accomplish some of those issues? And then I think you have to get very focused. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly who I'm trying to serve. And this is what I want to do. For me in the fitness industry, I think we need to be coming up with ancillary revenue. It's just a massive thing that needs to happen by design for franchisees and franchisors to be successful. That's part of the reason that I like this monetization tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it will be best used by somebody who builds from the bottom out with it, not by just tacking stuff on later, right? So really kind of, figuring out how to build your business in such a way that it's going to later kind of emerge. That would be something that I think is really important when you are open to whatever people are saying, what the investors are saying they're looking for. Are you tracking those types of things? If one day you need investment, do you have a dashboard that tracks those types of things? Or are you tracking the things that you think are important, which may not really be important? I put my foot in my mouth to an investor one time about that. So it's front of mind. I'm feeling good and stuff.
You have to know your KPIs, right? Know what is driving the business. And my big takeaway from what you're saying is obviously know your brand. Don't assume that just because you see somebody everywhere doesn't mean obviously that they are successful. And that includes opening locations or saying, hey, we just sold our X number of franchises. Are you seeing what I'm seeing of the amount of franchisors that are having I'm going to say it, an easy time selling franchises, but selling franchises and getting them open are two different things, right?
I think selling franchises left and right is sales, and it's sales. It's sales process. It's, having people believe the dream, and to your point, how they open and how they operate, can be different. And so what I've seen across a couple of brands that I've, touched personally is the notion of how quickly do we grow? How much do we make sure that the places that we get opened are operating successfully? And before we keep selling. The examples of Orange Theory even that sold so many and then pulled back and stopped selling before they sold more. So, I've seen different franchisors take different approaches. I want to sell, and then I'll open and then we'll tweak and we'll figure it out there. I've seen ones that are like, let's sell, open before we sell some more. This also brings up for me a little to the side of it is just who are you selling to, right? Because there are emerging franchisors that will sell to anybody. And they're selling because they're like, well, we're kind of like, thankful to them that they want to buy. It's like, okay, great. Well, is that going to be good for you long term? I mean, we don't have to just take people because we just want to, put a new location on the map. Like
Right.
what's going to happen later? And then, once you have some experience in it, you get a sense of like, yep, that was a good point. It didn't really work out with that person.
Right.
I have to flip it over. So I think there's a lot of people running a lot of different strategies on that. I will say one thing though. I think that it's a really nice thing that people are, especially in the fitness world, coming from jobs or occupations where they feel like they want more. And we're seeing a lot of that in fitness franchising, people who come from law, from accounting, and they have some money saved up. They maybe have, a single partner that hasn't been working. And now they want to take the opportunity to kind of invest in their community to do something that's more fun, more better for their neighborhood, by bringing a fitness or a wellness franchise in, and are thrilled to do it in a franchise system because ultimately they'll get all the support, guidance, tools, systems, and processes that they need. So that's a really nice thing. Like that's kind of a success story, right? We have more of these fitness wellness businesses opening. We're selling more to those types of people. They're smart, but they want to rely on the systems, and not overthink the systems or any of those types of things to go out and do it. So in the cases where we're selling a lot of units to those people and we're stepping back to like do population health and everybody feels better and our communities are stronger and tighter. I mean, I go back to, I love that. I love that initiative.
Sure. So Debra, I'm curious, of your clients, what are some of the most common themes that you're dealing with, that you address time and time again? Is there a common thread that you're finding with your emerging franchisor clients of what their needs are?
Really smart training and support systems, coming up with exactly what the right training and support is, what the right cadence is, I think is a massive theme. So you sign the FDD, what happens right then next, right after? I mean, something that I've seen that's brilliant is you get the package that makes sure that you don't have buyer's remorse, right?
Right.
You get like the welcome to the family package so nobody has buyer's remorse, and there's some hand holding that brings you kind of to the place where you get your kind of owner training, but not too soon, not too late. Just figuring out the cadence of how the openings will hit, who needs to be trained when, who needs to be hired when, how that fits into the model. Like that huge. So you keep people super engaged, super excited, but also trains on what they need to know and when they need to know. So I think that whole training support module and understanding that for the business and for the P&L and for the opening timeline and all that type of stuff is huge to think about. And another thing I think that is huge is kind of, we had created a RACI matrix back in the kind of row house days with exponentials. So franchisee handholding from the standpoint of what exactly we're giving you that you are, responsible for, and what we're responsible for, so we're responsible for down to some of the equipment in the studio. Like we're responsible for like the flooring, whatever, but the 2 chairs in the front you can do, for example. We're responsible for the overall structure and programming and job specs and checklists of like all of the people that you're hiring, but ultimately you're going to hire them and you're going to remit the taxes, for example, and you're going to fire them. Just all of those expectations that happen, what our tools will do and what our tools won't do. I think really being super duper clear within your team as well, the franchise team, franchisor team, the corporate team, on exactly what we are responsible for versus what they are responsible for, and where that line in the sand is, so that it's not joint employment, right, is super, super crucial and important, not only for the franchisee's comfort level and understanding, but also for the franchisor, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the staff, and I've seen this at the corporate level, will promise things left and right that aren't necessarily things that they should be promising. And that's where you get your toxic franchisees, and you get the, concerns that the systems and the support isn't where it should be, when in reality, maybe it was never supposed to be there. So crystal clear out of the gate, all the way back into the discovery day process, prior to the sales process coming in, every single time prospective franchisee touches, your brands or somebody representing your brands, all the way through the sales process, making sure that that's super crystal clear. And for me, that's kind of an element of brands also. So just to what degree we're handholding and stuff like that. So I think that's a hot topic when done right. It's great. When done wrong, it breaks it all down. It takes a while, but it breaks it all down later.
Debra, amen. That is great advice, because this is all about setting the expectation. And you said it yourself. This is not an issue, or this is not something about training. It's not about the discovery day. It's way in the front of the process. Every single touch, I guess we call it the value chain, right? Where every single touch of that the potential franchisee is going to have needs to have the right expectation, and needs to be set by, obviously by the company, by the franchisor, and it needs to filter throughout the entire organization, especially as we get through the sales process and discovery day, and they start hearing from different folks throughout the company. And that's why it is so critical that we have a really consistent message from start to finish. And there's nothing worse than communication breaking down because of inconsistent feedback or inconsistent messages being given throughout from the corporate staff. Hey, Debra, if someone was interested in working with you, how can they get more information and reach out?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, Debra Strougo, one word, DebraStrougo. And people who can contact me there, or go to my website, fitizensholdings.com. But ultimately, if we have a really good personality fit and we have a interest in what you're doing, I'm often finding ways to work with people that kind of speak to what I'm interested in doing, because ultimately I think we should all be in business doing and enjoying what we like. And by the way, that's why franchising is so fun, because when you find those people that want to be on your bandwagon and take it forward, I mean, that's just ridiculously fulfilling. So I also want to just wish everyone out there good luck. Super fun ride to be on.
Okay, Debra, this has been awesome, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I've got one last question. That's this.
Yeah.
So I finished the podcast with the tip jar, because the franchise community is just so generous with information and sharing advice. If I was looking to franchise my company and I'm this growing entrepreneur, what would be maybe a piece of advice that you'd give me before I franchise my business?
Do your due diligence and make sure that franchising is the right solution for you.
Awesome. Cool. Debra, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.